I've seen a lot of photos about liminal spaces, and for a few months now, I've been wondering about the meaning behind it. I kind of did a deep dive all over the internet, and to be honest, I don't know if I'm just slow, but the more explanations and stuff I came across, the more confusing it all was. One explanation I came across explained that it's being in a state that's not clearly defined physically or emotionally, shedding one set of experiences and getting ready for another. That there are transitional places between the end of one thing and the beginning of another, places you aren't meant to stay in. Which I guess I do kind of understand. Before I had looked up the actual definition, I always thought that liminal spaces represented being trapped or being lured into an alternate or false reality. But never mind that, we can get back to it. Maybe someone in the comments can explain it to me in the simplest, most straightforward way possible.
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
The question I really have, I guess, and most people do, is why these photos are so unsettling. In these pictures, there's nothing really bad, per se, being shown. They're all kind of just empty photos, no people, no animals, just a bunch of different places that are devoid of human life. But just from looking at a lot of these pictures, you get kind of an eerie feeling. Like anyone, I have a lot of fears. The dark, the ocean, small confined spaces, making an important phone call. There's nothing in any of these photos, though, that I've come across that would be on my list of fears. But imagining myself being in any of these places, in the setting that we see them in, gives me the heebie-jeebies. In a lot of the places that are shown in these photos, they seem a bit like they are too quiet, too peaceful. They almost look like they take on a different life than what you'd be used to if you saw them at a different time during the day or in a different setting. It kind of feels like these photos show these places in a state where something is off, where something could possibly happen in any moment compared to when there are a lot of people around and you feel way more comfortable, which is kind of ironic because you kind of don't expect to be hurt or harmed in an empty place when nobody's around, and when there are people around it's more expected because it's usually people who would hurt you. But you get the sense that they're dangerous in more of a mental way than a physical one. Being alone in certain places at certain times, the paranoia, and just the overall feeling of unease or discomfort that can come along with that is something that these places play into for me. But on the other hand, there are a lot of people who feel like these places seem comforting and they'd like to actually be in some of these places because of the feeling they get from seeing them. I know that a lot of the places in these photos are familiar or seem familiar to a lot of people, like from a dream or something from their past. They definitely can give off a very strong feeling of nostalgia when you see them. And it does make a lot of sense because many of the places shown in these pictures are places that most people have been in at some point or another in their lives. That being said, I am kind of starting to understand the whole meaning and the definition behind it, especially as it relates to transitional spaces and being in one state that you're not supposed to stay in because you're transitioning into another. But anyway, seeing photos of places that seem familiar can definitely be comforting. But I feel like it can also be a case where something is hidden behind that familiarity or the nostalgia that place holds for you, which gives it more of a sinister feel. But I guess it all depends on how it is viewed. For some people, it might bring them solace for different reasons, and for others it can be troubling. But whichever way you choose to look at it, there is no denying that there can be something quite ominous about liminal spaces. There are some days when I'm at home and I go outside and it feels unnaturally quiet, or I'm inside the house alone and it feels strange compared to other days when I'm home alone and I feel perfectly fine. I get filled with a really strong sense of apprehension and I never really know why, but looking at a lot of these photos I get that same feeling. And it usually happens during the day. Does anybody know that feeling that I'm talking about, or has anybody else experienced that before? Either way, it definitely is a very interesting concept, and it's on my list of things that I find strange and kinda creepy. I have seen some games centered around liminal spaces and exploring them, and I definitely like to play at least one of them just to see how it is and experience that feeling and see if it's the same or if it would make it less scary or more scary for me. I'm also curious to know if anyone has ever found themselves in a liminal space or state while actively being aware of it. Apart from the few times that I described while I've been at home, I can't really think of any other times when I felt like I was in a liminal space or state. There are a few memories I have of feeling kind of a ominous vibe when I'm alone, but I don't know if I can attribute that to being in a liminal space or not. Having put all this together now, I said something before about not seeing anything on my list of fears in any of these photos, and I have to take that back because I see that a lot of these pictures have some like dark corners and dark places that would definitely really scare me and I would definitely want to stay away from. But if you were to somehow end up in any of these liminal spaces, how would you feel? Whether it's a place that's familiar to you or some place that's completely unknown, a place you've never been before. But that's my 2 cents on liminal spaces. I will try to learn a lot more about this because it's definitely something that I've taken an interest in. And maybe after learning a lot more about it and just spending time with it, I can revisit this topic in the future and see if my opinion has changed. Goodbye and stay safe.